Is respect really earned, or just stamped on fabric? The hall still echoed with a flag rope click, the smell of polish and coffee drifting under the flicker of a fluorescent light. They mocked her jacket, called it stolen valor, then paused because grief doesn't carry ID tags. Under the dim glow, the patch shimmered its half-hidden engraving, catching light as the heartbeat of the room slowed into silence. Still, the old general watched from his chair, coffee cooling in his hand, the air heavy with something unspoken, quiet. Men leave echoes too. The training hall smelled of polish and coffee. Folding chairs stood in uneven rows, the metal legs clicking against the varnished floor. Veterans Week banners hung half-taped, fluttering whenever the door opened. Erin Callan balanced a stack of chairs, her late father's sealed jacket hanging loose on her shoulders. It was too big for her sleeves past the wrists, collar frayed a patch at the breast pocket, stitched half loose with something engraved beneath. "Ma'am," a voice barked from behind, clipped official. Lieutenant Miller strode in, clipboard in hand. "You can't wear that uniform here." Erin blinked. "I'm not wearing a uniform, sir. It was my father's. I'm helping set up." "That emblem," he said, pointing at the patch. "That is SEAL issue. Only authorized personnel. It's Veterans Week. I thought it was okay to honor him." Miller set his clipboard on a chair with a flat slap. Honor is one thing. Impersonating service is another. Across the room, General Marcus Hale looked up from his styrofoam cup. He was retired now, the coffee volunteer who arrived before anyone else and left after the floor shone. He watched the young woman freeze under the fluorescent light. Steam rose from his cup and faded like breath on cold glass. Erin lowered the chairs one by one. "I don't mean trouble." "Trouble is already here," Miller said. "Security." A janitor pushed his mop in slow circles near the door. The sound filled the moment between their words. No one moved for a few seconds. Then two volunteers approached, unsure what to do with orders they didn't understand. Hale stood. His voice was quiet, the kind that belonged to radio more than command. "Lieutenant, you might want to look twice at that patch." Miller did not turn. "Sir, I know a regulation breach when I see one." "Regulations don't know grief," Hale murmured. "But grief still shows respect." The younger man's jaw tightened. "She used the term SEAL in public. It's a clear misrepresentation." Erin bit her lip. "My dad was on Team 4. He never made it back from deployment. This was his." Her hand hovered over the patch. A flash of metal caught the light under the thread, half an engraving, half a memory. Hale noticed, but said nothing. He just set his cup on the table and folded his hands. Rosa Vance, the cafeteria manager, peeked through the door. She had served coffee to both of them for years and knew a storm when she heard one. "Everything all right here?" Miller didn't answer. He signaled for a volunteer to call the front desk. The volunteer's hand shook as he reached for the radio. Sir Erin said softly, "If you'd just let me explain, ma'am. I'm afraid it's procedure." The word hung there, procedure, as heavy as a hand on her shoulder. Hale knew that pressure, how protocol could pin a person in place without touching them. Miller nodded to the volunteer. "Escort her to the office for verification." The volunteer hesitated. Erin held out her hands, confused, trying not to look afraid. "Really over a jacket?" "Regulations are clear," Miller said. The handcuffs clicked once, official hollow echoing off the hall's bare walls. The radio on the table buzzed with static. Then the PA system crackled and froze mid-sentence. Hale didn't move. He just watched as Erin's eyes fell to the floor where his coffee cup had left a dark ring, small, circular, like a mark waiting to be understood. The holding room at the back of the training hall still smelled of polish and paperwork. A fluorescent light hummed overhead, steady as a metronome. Erin sat on a metal chair jacket folded across her knees. The patch stared up at her like a question she couldn't answer. Lieutenant Miller paced between two filing cabinets, clipboard tucked beneath his arm. "You understand, ma'am, we have to verify any display of classified insignia." "I told you," Erin said quietly. "It was my dad's. That's all." He didn't sit. He just kept pacing. Regulation had its own rhythm, louder than reason. The door opened. Mrs. Rosa Vance stepped in, balancing a paper tray. "Brought coffee," she said. "Everybody needs caffeine before they say something they'll regret." Miller exhaled through his nose. "Thank you, ma'am, but this is an official inquiry." Rosa set the cups down anyway. Her tone softened the corners of the room. "Young lady's been helping me stack chairs all week. She's got better manners than most officers I serve." Erin managed a faint smile. "Thanks, Mrs. Vance." "I'll need to see identification," Miller said. He placed a blank form on the table pen, tapping against the line marked "Subject Name." Erin pulled a worn driver's license from her pocket. He studied it longer than necessary, then sighed. "Callan. Any relation to Petty Officer Daniel Callan, my father?" Miller's eyes flickered. Recognition almost surfaced, then discipline drowned it again. Procedure still applies. Across the corridor, General Hale paused outside the window. Through the half-drawn blinds, he saw the loose patch on the folded jacket, a faint shimmer beneath the frayed thread. Something about the engraving curved like a wing. An operator's mark, the kind he hadn't seen in decades. He lifted his cup cold now and turned toward the storage lockers by the wall. A janitor's key ring jingled softly as Hale opened the middle locker marked "Lost and Found." Inside lay a small metal coin, dull from years of touch. When he held it to the light, the same curved mark flashed across its face. The coin slipped from his fingers, spinning once before landing flat on the table. Light flared off its edge, bouncing against the locker door, and for an instant, the reflection of his own eyes stared back at him, a memory waking. Short number 2 coin spins. Light flare. Cut to Hale's reflection. Back in the room, Miller pushed another form forward. "You'll have a hearing at noon. Until then, you'll stay here." Erin looked up. "Am I under arrest? It's just..." "Procedure." Rosa folded her arms. "She's no threat, Lieutenant. She's just wearing a memory." Miller's tone thinned. "Memory can be misused." "She was pinned by protocol." Rosa said, voice firm but kind. "Maybe you ought to look at what's holding the pin." The words hung there, not an accusation, more like a reflection. Miller stared at the patch again, the way it caught the light. For a second his face softened, then stiffened back into duty. "I'll file the report." Hale slipped the coin into his palm and closed the locker. He would need to check the archives before the hearing. He knew now what he'd seen. He just wasn't sure anyone else would believe it. The fluorescent light flickered. Somewhere down the hall, the PA system hissed with static. A breath of silence followed long enough for everyone to feel it. Then a door clicked shut. The diner sat at the edge of Main Street, its windows fogged from the morning chill. A neon sign blinked, "Marley's Corner." Coffee. Pies. News humming like an old hymn. The Veterans Week parade would pass by in 2 hours, but the talk had already started inside. 3 retired men in windbreakers crowded a booth near the jukebox. Their medals clinked whenever someone gestured too hard. A folded copy of the Riverton Chronicle lay open on the counter between them. The headline circled in red ink, "Local woman arrested for impersonating a seal." "Can you believe that?" one of them said. "Wearing the patch and all. Makes the rest of us look foolish." Across the room, Rosa Vance poured coffee into a row of heavy mugs. "Makes the rest of you look judgmental," she said, voice steady. That girl was helping, not pretending. The first man grunted. Helping, sure. In a SEAL jacket, it was her father's. Another veteran snorted. Everybody's father was something these days. The room filled with that particular silence that happens when pride replaces reason. Rosa wiped the counter once, slow and deliberate. "You boys forget what respect looks like when it isn't wearing a name tag." A younger waitress whispered, "Isn't that the same jacket from the photo last year?" "What photo?" Rosa asked. "The one in the memorial," the waitress said, unfolding an old paper from beneath the till. The page showed a black and white team shot, SEAL Team 4, 1991. A curved engraving glinted on one patch, half a wing, half a flame. At the far booth, General Marcus Hale looked up from his plate of toast. He hadn't planned to listen, but the sound of that name, Callan, made his coffee tremble against the saucer. He leaned closer, pretending to study the crossword. Through the paper's yellowed photo, he traced the same mark he'd seen on Aaron's jacket and on the coin in his pocket. The edges matched perfectly, like two halves of the same truth. Behind him, the jukebox changed tracks, Sam Cooke's "Bring It On Home to Me." The music softened, the chatter gave room for reflection. Rosa turned to the veterans. "You ever think maybe service isn't something you can fake? Maybe it's something that keeps showing up even when you don't want it to?" The oldest man shifted in his seat. "You talk like you knew her father." "I served him coffee every Friday," Rosa said. "He always left the same tip, one coin with that mark on it." The three men went quiet. The newspaper rustled as one of them folded it back over the headline. Short number 3 newspaper fold. Hale's eyes lift. Hale placed a few dollars under his plate and stood. His reflection in the window looked older than he felt, shoulders squared out of habit. Rosa glanced his way. "Morning, General. You hear all that?" He smiled faintly. "Hard not to. You think she meant any harm?" He slid the coin across the counter. "I think she's carrying proof she doesn't even know she has." Rosa blinked. "Then what happens next?" Hale looked toward the door where the first sound of a marching band floated in. "Depends on who's still willing to look." She refilled his cup, but he was already walking away. The bell over the door jingled, leaving the scent of coffee and the low hum of the jukebox behind him. Then someone mentioned the general was watching. The veteran center smelled of old varnish and folded flags. Folding chairs filled the hall again, but now the air carried judgment instead of polish. A banner for Veterans Week recognition ceremony hung slightly askew its edge, brushing against the flag cord that trembled with every breath of air. Erin sat alone at a table near the front. Her father's jacket rested in her lap, folded so the patch faced upward. A faint thread of silver glimmered along the frayed edge, the same half-wing engraving General Hale had memorized. Chief Rogers' uniform pressed sharp, stepped to the microphone. "We're here to clarify the incident involving Miss Erin Callan." His tone was even official, yet tinged with regret. "Lieutenant Miller has filed a report concerning unauthorized insignia use." Miller cleared his throat. "Regulations." Rosa Vance raised a hand from the audience. "Sometimes regulations forget they work for people." A few murmurs rippled through the rows. Rogers nodded once. "We'll allow testimony. General Hale, you requested to speak." The old man rose slowly, his cane tapping once against the floor, steady, deliberate. "Lieutenant, he said you questioned a symbol you didn't understand." He placed an envelope on the table, sliding out a photo yellowed by years. This was SEAL Team 4, 1991. Petty Officer Daniel Callan, front row. Gasps scattered like wind through paper. Miller leaned closer. The engraving on the photographed patch matched the mark on Aaron's jacket exactly. Hale reached into his coat pocket, producing the dull coin he'd found in the locker. "And this," he said, holding it up, "was given to every operator in that unit. Same curve, same mark. A memorial design for those who never came home." Aaron pressed a hand over her mouth. "Dad always carried one," she whispered. Rosa stood, voice trembling but clear. "He used to leave it as a tip. I kept one in my drawer for 20 years. Miller stared at the photo, at the coin, at the daughter sitting beneath the banner. For a moment, the weight of procedure slipped from his face. I didn't know. No one blamed you for not knowing," Hale said gently. "But knowing now, you can choose what you stand for." He reached to his lapel fingers, brushing the single badge he still wore, a service pin polished nearly smooth. Then, before the crowd, he unpinned it and set it on the desk beside the coin. Proof reveal plus symbolic turn. "This belongs next to hers," he said. "Protocol can't hold a candle to truth." The hall went still. Outside, the parade music drifted faintly through the open doors. Inside, silence gathered like light. The flag cord fluttered once the soft hiss of rope against metal, the only applause they would hear. Chief Rogers cleared his throat. "In view of these findings, the report is withdrawn. Miss Callan's record will remain clean, and the community owes her an apology." Miller nodded, eyes down. "Yes, sir," Aaron whispered. "Thank you." Rosa dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "We just needed someone to notice." The sunlight shifted across the polished floor, crossing the desk, where badge and coin touched edge to edge. For 10 quiet seconds, no one spoke. Silent beat. Camera holds on light crossing floor. By morning, the Riverton Chronicle had changed its tune. Yesterday's accusation was gone, replaced by a headline set in softer ink. "Honor restored, operator's mark identified." The photo beneath showed the same patch and coin, now resting side by side in a small glass case at the Veterans Center. The caption read, "In memory of Petty Officer Daniel Callan and those who served quietly among us." The diner at Marley's Corner was quieter than usual. Veterans sat with folded newspapers and half-drunk coffee, reading the article line by line. The jukebox played something slow and forgiving. Rosa Vance wiped a table, glancing at a customer's paper. "They finally got it right," she said. "Took them long enough to remember what respect sounds like." At the counter, Erin traced her finger over her father's name printed in the story. Her voice was soft. "I never thought people would know him again." "They knew," Rosa said, setting a refill beside her. "They just forgot for a while." Lieutenant Miller appeared at the doorway, uniform crisp, but face less so. Conversations dipped into silence as he approached. "Miss Callan," he began on behalf of the Veterans Committee and myself, "I'd like to issue a formal apology. My report was incorrect and my judgment narrow." Aaron stood unsure what to say. "You were following procedure." "Procedure shouldn't come before people," he said, extending a hand. She shook it, the gesture small but steady. Rosa leaned on the counter, smiling faintly. "Well, Lieutenant, looks like you finally polished a rule till it shined." A few quiet chuckles rolled through the diner, the kind of laughter that forgives without forgetting. Across town, the Veterans Center displayed the glass case by the entrance. The operator's marked coin caught the morning light, a single flare crossing the engraved curve. Hale had arranged it himself, refusing any plaque with his name. "It's for her father," he'd said, "not for the man who almost missed it." The community gathered that afternoon, a mix of uniforms and aprons, teachers and mail clerks. Rosa read a letter aloud from the paper's editorial board, admitting the misunderstanding and thanking those who served with humility unseen. Hale stood in the back row, hat in hand. Miller joined beside him, the two men silent. For the first time, neither one was in command. When the brief ceremony ended, Hale lingered near the display. He pressed 2 fingers to the glass, tracing the edge of the coin. The sunlight shifted again, turning the reflection of his hand into the shape of a salute. He lowered it quietly, before anyone noticed. Outside, Rosa caught up to him. "You sure you're all right, General?" He nodded, his tone almost amused. "I've been wrong before, but rarely in public." She grinned. "Comes with the rank." They walked together toward the street, the sound of the diner door closing behind them, like a page turning. Still, Hale kept something in his coat pocket, silent beat newspaper rustle under morning light. The Riverton Library smelled faintly of old paper and furniture polish. Morning light filtered through the tall windows, striking the new display near the entrance, a folded flag, a photograph, and a small brass plaque set beneath the glass. In honor of Petty Officer Daniel Collin. Service without show. Erin stood beside it, her father's patch resting in her palm. The fabric felt softer now, the stitching no longer heavy with misunderstanding. General Hale approached his steps, slow cane-tapping rhythm on the marble floor. The board agreed this should be where people learn, not just look, he said. Erin nodded, eyes bright. He would have liked that. Hale motioned toward the frame. "Go ahead, it's yours to place." She bent down and slid the patch beneath the flag, aligning it beside the coin in its corner. The light from the window caught both the curve of the operator's mark, glowing faintly like morning metal. He stood back, studying the reflection. For a moment, his own face merged with the glass, older and smaller, inside the frame. Then he reached out and touched the reflection, just enough to smudge the light. "Tidal echo pass," he murmured under his breath. Rosa Vance appeared at the doorway with Chief Rogers beside her, both still in their Sunday clothes. "Looks like the town finally remembered how to say thank you," she said softly. Chief Rogers folded his hat. Took a week of headlines to find humility. Erin straightened a printed note taped at the bottom of the display. The handwriting was hers, but the words had come from Hale. Truth doesn't need a uniform. 5 words. Enough for a life summary. The choir from the church across the street drifted through the open window, an old hymn without words, just hums of harmony. Nobody clapped. Nobody spoke. Quiet filled the library like grace, arriving late but staying long. Rosa dabbed her eyes, then whispered, "Guess rules can learn too." Hale smiled. They can when people remind them. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve near the reading desk. "Who was he, Mom?" The mother bent close. A man who did his job and never asked for medals. Hale heard it, and that seemed enough. He turned toward the door, letting the light from the window fall across his shoulder the same way it had fallen over so many uniforms before. Only now, it touched a man unburdened. Outside, Rosa paused, watching the light widen through the library's glass wall. "Funny thing about truth," she said. "It always finds the right window." Erin joined her at the doorway. "Thank you for not giving up on him." Rosa smiled. "Honey, your dad didn't need rescuing, just remembering." They stood as the choir hum swelled, mingling with the creak of the library sign in the wind. The light reached the plaque, stayed there for a moment, and then faded. If this story moved you, share it forward. The library lights dimmed toward evening gold glass, catching the dust that floated like slow confetti. Hale lingered near the display, the scent of polish and paper, blending with faint choir hum drifting through the open door. Then gently, He laid his palm against the glass, where the patch and coin rested, his reflection bending inside the frame, as if 2 generations shared one quiet salute. Some lessons, he thought, don't march or shout. They stand still like a lamp in a winter window, showing anyone passing by what grace looks like when it stops pretending to shine. Still, Rosa and Chief Rogers watched from the doorway. Heads bowed, witness to a peace earned without ceremony. And when the last light crossed the plaque that read, "Truth doesn't need a uniform," the room stayed warm long after they'd gone. Kicker: if this story moved you, share it forward.